Today, I want to share with you my opinion about why I think the MCAT, GPA, situational judgment test, interviews of any kind are absolute complete BS. And I believe they should, in fact, be stopped and banned because not only that they have any value, they, in fact, are harmful to applicants, to the society, and everyone else that's impacted by this. And this is unlike some of our usual episodes. But before I get into the details, thanks so much for joining me for another episode of One Question Podcast. My name is Baruz Momeni. If you've never watched any of these episodes, normally we tackle one topic and we dissect it many different ways. And today is something that's actually very special. It's something I've been researching for years, and it's unlike most of the episodes. I talk to you about strategies to, ace the MCAT, or how to increase your GPA, how to tackle situational judgment test, how to tackle different types of interviews. And that's what we normally do at BMO. But today I want to tell you a little bit about why, based on my opinion and based on research I've done, these tools are absolute garbage. They shouldn't be used. They don't do anything at all. In fact, they're harmful for you. Now, having said that, again, you have no choice, because at the end of the day, this is the world we live in. Until admissions processes improve over time and people make changes, this is what's going to happen. So in the meantime, you should still aspire to do whatever it is that you need to do in order for you to be able to get over the admissions hump and get on with your career, if that's really what you want to do. Now, let's go back to these. Why do I believe GPA, MCAT, situational judgment test, and interviews are complete BS, in my opinion? Well, there's many reasons. First of all, if you have watched my TEDx talk, I talk about this. And most of these things were developed back, or variations of it. This is not what they were called or exactly the same. These were mostly conceived back in the 1800s. One of the people that was involved was an individual called Edward Lee Thorndike. And his idea was to try to standardize things for factory workers. So, for example, not going to go into too much of the history, the school bells that you still have in schools come from the era of factory workers, and the bells were designed to condition factory workers to stop work, to start work. Literally like Pavlovian dogs. So that's, and at the time maybe it was okay, but it's funny that we still have school bells in schools. And one of the things that this individual did, as one of the many things, is they also introduced, and then eventually other people picked up on this person's work, and eventually we brought standardized testing. And again, the idea back in the day was that, hey, if you come from the elites, then you got to become lawyers, doctors, etc. And this was mostly based on wealth and status in the society. And they devised a standardized test that mostly favored those type of individuals. And if you didn't do well on these tests, you essentially just shouldn't even go beyond high school, because they were just training you to go become factory workers. That's all it was. So now that's sort of a broad history. And now what are we doing today? What has changed? Well, we're still using grades. We're still using standardized tests. We're now adding bells and whistles, which is not really, like, we're using situational judgment tests. Some of you have taken many different formats of situational judgment tests or are about to take them, and then many different forms of interviews. As you may know, I also founded another company, sortsmart.com. You can go visit that. That's essentially develops and does research and development and admission screening tools, and also applicant screening tools in the hiring process for businesses. During that process, we did a lot of research, and one of the things we found, and the research is on the blog on sortsmart.com's blog. You could go read those on your own if you want. We'll put it somewhere around this episode as well, so for you to have access. One of the things we saw was that, first of all, GPA and MCAT, and this is not new, by the way, other people have shown this as well, correlates significantly with wealth. The wealthier you are, the better you do. So then the idea was, hey, is it because people have more money to prep? No, our data showed that people who are from lower income versus higher income, no matter where their income level is, they have the same propensity to seek help, coaching, etc., etc. So that's not it. So what is it? So there's something intrinsic about the test, most likely, that is causing bias. It could also be familiarity with the test, because if you come from a family like that, there's a good chance your parents have taken a similar test to that, so they're more familiar. They can help you out in that way as well. Now, that was one of the things. This was, what about situational judgment tests and interviews? Very similar situation, but not as conclusive and as clear-cut as GPA and MCAT as far as wealth goes. But all of these things, nevertheless, had another problem in our experiments. Neither of them can detect intrinsic motivation, which would be the first, second, third, fourth concern of any admissions office. Nothing else matters. Being a good test taker, who cares if you don't have the intrinsic motivation to actually want to become a doctor, lawyer, dentist, pharmacist, a teacher, whatever. And I'll give a brief background on intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation, as opposed to extrinsic motivation, is the desire to engage in an activity because the activity itself is a source of joy, not because of some external factor. So you're not doing it because you're getting money. You're not doing it because you're getting punishment. You're not doing it for prestige. You're not doing it for social pressure. It's just the activity itself is enjoyable. And that is the only thing, or the most important thing, an admission office has got to measure, because you want to know how genuinely is this person finds the process of becoming a doctor or a lawyer or a dentist, and actually being in that profession is the reason they're applying, rather than other factors. Yes, doesn't mean people should not get paid. That's not what that means, by the way. I know some people are going to make arguments and be like, oh, this guy is saying, oh, we shouldn't get paid. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying getting paid should not be the only reason. Social pressure, prestige, etc. should not be the reason you want to be a doctor. It's just too important. It cannot be the only reason. It cannot be the most important reason. Can it be one of the reasons? Sure. It just cannot be the only reason or the most important reason. The most important reason is because you want to be a doctor. You find that process of being a doctor intrinsically motivating. It's a source of joy. You would do it if you weren't getting paid for it. You would find another source of income. So how am I saying all of this? Intrinsic motivation and its impact and what it does, because it's been shown by over 40 years of research. Think about that. Over 40 years of research across domains in different parts of the world, hundreds of different researchers demonstrating that it correlates with happiness, with performance, with less burnout, and overall job satisfaction. What else would you want? This is why this is so important. Do GPA, MCAT, situational judgment tests, and interviews detect intrinsic motivation? Absolutely not. That's one reason by itself, beyond the fact that they cause possibly socioeconomic, cultural, racial bias. That's another reason why they should not be used. They have no value. So what do they correlate with? So why are they using these things? So how did people come up with these? Flaws in experimentation, flaws in judgment, and of course, forces of economics, because some of these things have turned into multi-million-dollar adventures for certain individuals and companies. Now, were they able to convince people admission officers in the first place? Well, some of the admission officers had some maybe conflict of interest originally. Two, they didn't have any skin in the game. And I'll explain both of these concepts. Now, what sort of a science have these guys shown with GPA, MCAT, situational judgment test, interviews? Well, first of all, most of the science is willy-nilly. Not proper controls, not enough sample size. They don't understand statistical significance. I challenge anyone to a live debate going over actual papers for these things to show them and embarrass them in a large audience fashion that none of these have been properly tested because of judgment of statistical error and what they're correlating them with. If the correlation is wrong, who cares? So for example, if I want a temperature of a room and get a ruler out, who cares if the ruler is accurate? Ruler cannot measure the temperature of a room. In this case, for example, GPA, MCAT, situational judgment test, interviews, what do they correlate them with? They usually correlate them with future on-the-job performance. Sorry, not future on-the-job performance, future test performance, other tests. So in essence, they're predictors of other tests. But then again, who cares? So are we selecting test takers? People who are good at taking tests, or are we selecting great future doctors, lawyers, dentists, teachers, etc.? For the most part, this is what's been. Has there been some elements of the research for some of these tools that have some benefits? Yes, but the benefits are way less than the pitfalls that are and the cons that I've explained already. Lack of ability to detect intrinsic motivation, significant bias against certain individuals. These two alone should have caused these to be banned. So why are they not banned? Let's now discuss that. I told you some of these people have, who are decision makers, have not turned these into organizations. Some of them could even be non-profit organizations. Doesn't mean anything. If there's someone who is getting paid and jobs being created from that, that means they're not volunteers. Show me an organization for these three things that are being used with a 100% volunteer base, then I agree that, oh, they're doing it out of the kindness of their heart. They're not volunteers. I can guarantee you that. Two, what's the other type of people that are not saying anything or not making changes? They don't have any skin in the game. So most universities, they're using these tools and they either want to please their buddies who do have some sort of a hand in these organizations that promote these type of tools. So there's some sort of a reason. And if these people are not their buddies, and it's not a buddy-buddy system, what's happening is that they don't have any skin in the game. So for example, if you're an admissions dean, you're not going to get fired if who would I even tell? If I go show the president of the university that, hey, look at the admissions dean using these tools and they all cause bias and they don't detect intrinsic motivation. They don't care because nobody says anything. Remember, universities become large enough and institutionalized enough as part of the government that, for example, you can go write them a negative review. Who cares? They're funded by the government. If they're not funded by the government, at least partially, they're a sort of an institution that are not held accountable to public opinion, the same way a for-profit organization is. For example, at BMO, we bent over backwards to make sure 99.9% of our students are satisfied. That's how, if you go on Trustpilot, you see more than 99% of our 98 or 98% is they're satisfied because their opinion matters and it actually forces us to keep making changes, making things better. But what about a university? Do they do that? No. And as a result, does anyone get fired? No. Does anybody get disciplined or lose their job? No. Zero skin in the game is always a bad system. Universities, for the most part, I'm generalizing here a little bit, for the most part, are bad systems because they don't have any skin in the game. Nothing happens to them if they discriminate against someone knowingly or unknowingly. Nothing happens to them if they bring in somebody who looks good on paper based on MCAT, GPA, situational judgment tests, and interviews, and then this person becomes a doctor and kills people, or I don't know, does professional misconduct, etc. Nothing happens. So my point was, I hope this opened your eyes a little bit. You got something that people don't talk about, so that you know these things are not necessarily fair or scientific. And this is the reason I started BMO. This is the reason I started SwordSmart. And, we've had many times people threatened us. People tried to silence us. This is like even some universities. It's never going to happen, because for as long as we can, we're going to be advocating for you. And I hope this gave a little bit of a behind the scenes of why I started BMO and why we got all our very hardworking, dedicated team literally busting their ass day and night to make sure that you get the information you need, so that you cannot be unfairly treated by these type of tools. And that's the reason I normally create content for you guys. That's the reason we're in existence. We want to make sure that everyone has access to information, at least. And then again, if even someone wants us to help them directly, then by all means, they could also enroll in one of our programs. But the majority of our things we actually give for free. I don't want us to charge for free. Information should not be charged for, and that's why we do it. And the motivation for us has been and remains the fact that these tools are not the right tools. So we want to bring in as much information so that everyone has the same sort of information, at least when they're going to their admissions test. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed making it for you. If you did, go ahead and give this a like, comment below. If you have any questions for me, I'll be more than happy to answer them. Share this with a friend who may enjoy this as well. And lastly, definitely subscribe if you want to make sure you don't miss any of our future episodes. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to talk to you soon.